welcome. Tonight, Federal Executive Council orders the implementation of the Stephen Oronsanye report as it approves the merger, scrapping and relocation of some parastatals and agencies of government. Do not allow your ambition to becloud your sense of judgment. That's coming from the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Kayode Ariwoola, to the newly sworn-in justices of the Supreme Court. And Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, asked federal lawmakers to shun political and tribal sentiments as they begin the process of constitution amendment.
On business news tonight, Central Bank's two-day Monetary Policy Committee meeting to decide interest rates kicks off in Abuja amid soaring prices.
On sports news tonight, 9-time African champions, the Super Falcons of Nigeria, are through to the fourth and final round qualifier for the 2024 Paris Olympics.
As to the commencement of the planned NLC protest on high cost of living, the Trade Union Congress opts out of the exercise.
In international news from London, Alexei Navalny was about to be freed in a prisoner swap when he died. That's according to his ally, Maria Pevchik.
12 years after the Stephen Oronsanye Committee on the Rationalization and Restructuring of Federal Government Parastatals, Commissions and Agencies submitted its recommendations, the report has now been approved for implementation. The report recommends the merging, scrapping or relocation of some parastatals, agencies and commissions. Now, the decision, according to the Special Advisor to the President on Policy Coordination, Hadiza Bala Usman, is in line with the need to reduce cost of governance and streamline efficiency across the governance value chain.
Our administration has taken a very bold step towards implementation on aspects of the Oronsanye panel report, which speaks to mergers, subsuming, scrapping and relocation of parastatals, agencies and commissions of federal government. This is in line with the need to reduce cost of governance and ensure that we have streamlined efficiency across the governance value chain. For agencies that are required to be merged, I'll take it. National Agency for Control of AIDS, HIV/AIDS, NACA, to be merged with the Center for Disease Control in the Federal Ministry of Health. National Emergency Management Agency to be merged with the National Commission for Refugee Migration and Internally Displaced Persons. The Directorate of Technical Cooperation in Africa to be merged with the Directorate of Technical Aid and to function as a department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This compact with Nigeria Servicom to be subsumed to function as a department under the Bureau for Public Service Reform. The Border Communities Development Agency to be subsumed to function as a department under the National Boundary Commission. The National Salaries, Income and Wages Commission to be subsumed into the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Allocation Commission. The National Blood Service Commission to be converted into an agency and relocated to the Federal Ministry of Health. The Nigerian Diaspora Commission to be converted into an agency and to be relocated to the Federal Ministry, to the Ministry of Finance.
We'll have more on the implementation of the Oronsanye report in the course of the bulletin. The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Kayode Ariwoola, is asking newly sworn-in justices of the Supreme Court not to allow their ambition to becloud their sense of judgment. He gave the admonition at the swearing-in of the new justices of the Apex Court bench in Abuja. He adds that any interaction of the new justices with people of questionable character must be halted forthwith. Our judiciary correspondent, Emanuela Ekele, reports.
The ceremonial courtroom of the Supreme Court is filled up as friends and family members gather for the swearing-in of the newly appointed justices of the Apex Court. Former justices of the Supreme Court, governors, ministers, traditional rulers, Court of Appeal justices, and judges of lower courts were in attendance as the Supreme Court made history. This is the first time that the court will be having a full complement of justices as required by law. One after the other, the new justices take the oath of allegiance and move to the seat of elevation. The Chief Justice of Nigeria performed the swearing-in ceremony and admonished the justices on what is ahead of them.
At this level of adjudication, your Lordship should begin to see yourself as the representatives of the Almighty God on earth, because any judgment given at this level can only be overturned in heaven. You must not, therefore, allow your personal ambition or any extraneous consideration to becloud your sense of judgment.
Some senior advocates of Nigeria applaud the new addition to the Apex Court bench.
To think that people go all over the world saying that for a case to go through the hierarchy of Nigerian judiciary, it will take almost 30 years. It's not a good advertisement for our judicial system. So now we mean business. We believe that we can reduce things drastically and make sure that we can even contain things to maybe 6 years, 7 years.
There will be a very sharp departure from what has been going on because you have more hands. The stress that has been there, it's not that the stress will not be there, but they will be minimized. We are very, very hopeful with this development, and we are very happy of it because it's a long way to help us, especially at this Apex Court.
The Supreme Court now has a full complement of justices on its bench. The sworn-in 11 are expected to hit the ground running to help ease the long cases in the docket of the courts. From the Supreme Court of Nigeria, Emmanuela Ekele, Channels Television News.
Staying with the courts, the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu, will know his fate regarding his fresh bail application on March the 19th. This is because a federal high court sitting in Abuja has fixed the 19th and 20th of March this year for the resumption of his trial for alleged treasonable felony. Now, the trial judge, Justice Binta Nyako, fixed the date after taking arguments from the parties in the case.
The legal fireworks over the treasonable charges preferred against the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra resumed today at the Federal High Court. The prosecution and defense in the trial rejigged their legal teams. The new counsel to the IPOB leader, Mr. Aloy Ejimako, asking the court to grant bail to the client, basing his argument on the health status of Mr. Kanu, stating that the Department of State Services, where Mr. Kanu is being currently held, lacks the facility to attend to Mr. Kanu's heart condition. However, the new legal team of the federal government, led by Mr. Adegboyega Awomolo, object to the bail application on the ground that Mr. Kanu once jumped bail and fled from the country. Mr. Awomolo further argues that all the bail conditions previously set by the court was breached and violated by Mr. Kanu before he was rearrested. The IPOB also asked the court to discontinue his trial until certain conditions are met by the federal government. Mr. Kanu, in his preliminary objection, requested that the DSS operatives be barred from interfering with his lawyers during visitation, in addition to being allowed to wear clothes of his choice. Again, the federal government rejected the request on the grounds that Mr. Kanu lacks the right under any law to dictate how his trial will be conducted. Although the prosecutor was not available for comments, the defense lawyer is confident that the new legal team will do justice to the case.
Our client here has been detained for almost 5 years, counting to when he was detained from 2015 to today. So each extra day he remains in detention is a blight on his right to his liberty. So every lawyer should fight to have him enjoy his bail, be granted bail, so he can enjoy some freedom from this almost 5 years of detention and almost 7 years of being in exile.
The trial judge, Justice Binta Nyako, fixed the trial for March 19th and 20th, 2024 for ruling on the bail application and the commencement of trial.
Let's now go back to our top story on the Oronsanye report, and to give us more insight on that is a financial economist at the Nasarawa State University and former Commissioner for Finance in Imo State, Professor Uche Uwaleke. Great to have you on the News at 10, Professor.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right, so Professor, this is coming 12 years after the Oronsanye report was submitted. What's your initial reaction to today's announcement?
Well, I think it's cheering news. It's something that, in my view, has positive implications for cost of governance in Nigeria, especially against the backdrop of rising public debt, against the backdrop of widening fiscal imbalance. So I think implementing that report, will go a long way to reduce the fiscal imbalance and, of course, move the country towards fiscal consolidation. But of course, I think the time given to the 8-member committee to ensure that all the legal things are in place, I think is too short. That's talking about 12 weeks. I think more time should be allowed to be able to, conclude that, given the magnitude of the assignment. Recall that the white paper, the first white paper came out in 2014, and then there was another one again in 2022. And if you look at that white paper containing 270 items, there are a whole lot. So if the government is going to implement the white paper, you will also realize that majority of what you find in that white paper were either rejected or the government just noted. Only a few of them were accepted. So if you now consider the fact that today, we have about 929 MDAs, listed by the government, as opposed to the 541 parastatals and commissions and agencies that were originally identified. What comes to mind is that there may be need to again do a further review to see to ensure that this time around the exercise is a lot more comprehensive.
All right, Professor.
Out of the 541 that they identified at the time, 52 of them were supposed to be merged. Then you had another 38 to be abolished, and then 14 to made them extra ministerial departments. So I am saying that given the fact that time has passed, given the fact that we have more MDAs now, there may be need to for the committee to do a further review before starting implementation.
All right, Professor.
Implementation will also have human dimensions, job implications. So these are things that must be taken into cognizance before implementing.
All right, very quickly now, Professor. Given the current economic hardship, of course, in the country, how do you expect, really, the government to utilize the savings from this implementation from the Oronsanye report? Very quickly.
Yes, if the report is implemented as it is, we may not see significant impact. I just mentioned that if you look at that white paper, just a few of the items were accepted. Many of that, were rejected. The government, for example, the white paper, for example, recommended, take for example the measure of NUC, the NAPTEP, and the National Council for Commission for Education. But that was rejected. There were so many other recommendations too that were rejected. So if the white paper is going to be implemented the way it is, we may not see significant savings, as such. That's why I talked about, reviewing it and also ensuring that, a lot more of that, happens. But of course, if we have savings, I want to see those savings go into reducing budget deficits, reducing the level of borrowing, that the government plans to make, especially in the budget. But of course, I don't expect that any outcome of this will reflect in the budgetary process until 2026.
All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it at that.
If we must do it well.
All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it at that. Professor Uche Waleke, we thank you so much for your thoughts on the news at 10. In part 2, after the break, federal government reiterates commitment to address epileptic power supply in Nigeria as Vice President Kashim Shettima launches Light Up Nigeria project for the Southeast region. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, coming to you live on Channels Television from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Federal Executive Council orders the implementation of the Stephen Oronsanye report as it approves the merger, scrapping and relocation of some parastatals and agencies of government. Do not allow your ambition to becloud your sense of judgment. That's coming from the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Kayode Ariwoola, to the newly sworn-in justices of the Supreme Court. And Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, asked federal lawmakers to shun political and tribal sentiments as they begin the process of constitution amendment. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Tajuddin Abbas, has charged the Constitutional Amendment Committee of the House of Representatives to shun political and tribal sentiments in putting together far-reaching reforms that will ensure the updated constitution that will lead to national development. Mr. Abbas, who inaugurated the committee at a ceremony in Abuja, also declared open a citizens' engagement aimed at collating the views of Nigerians on some contentious issues in the constitution. Our correspondent, Dele Omoyeni, reports.
Just as they make their way to their seats.
The 10th Assembly House of Representatives has inaugurated its Committee on Constitutional Review, headed by the Deputy Speaker, Mr. Benjamin Kalu.
It is my honor and pleasure to formally inaugurate the Committee on Constitutional Review of the 10th House of Representatives for the service of our nation.
Inaugurating the 45-man committee, the Speaker admonished them to ensure that political or ethnic inclinations do not dictate their outcomes.
Among these are the devolution of powers, including state policing, enhancement of fiscal federalism through local government autonomy, further decongesting the exclusive legislative list, recognizing and assigning constitutional roles for traditional institutions, and promoting inclusivity, particularly greater gender equity.
The Deputy Speaker assures that the committee under his leadership will work for a process that is transparent and open to all.
The call to action is clear, and the pathway forward is illuminated by the principles of dialogue, principles of advocacy, principles of participation, principles of unity and inclusivity.
Stakeholders urged the committee to focus on critical areas like security, true federalism, and inclusion of women, youths, and persons with disability.
Now that the committee of both houses have been duly constituted, let us begin the task with every seriousness that it demands and come up with amendments that satisfy the wishes and aspirations of our people.
The National Assembly has incrementally amended and altered the Constitution since 2010, and several landmark alterations to the Constitution have happened. These are very important and sit against the context of lots of Nigerians who question how this constitution came about.
While applauding the committee for starting work on time, they also urged them to ensure that work is completed before the next political campaigns begin.
Staying with the National Assembly, the chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance, Senator Sani Musa, is back in the federal government's tax credit scheme, explaining that it can bridge road project financing. Now, Senator Musa stated this when the committee met with the Minister of Works, Mr. Dave Umahi, in Abuja. Senator Musa urges the contractors involved to ensure that the road projects are completed on time. Our National Assembly correspondent, Gloria Omezoke, reports.
The Senate Committee on Finance is having this interface with the Minister of Works over the federal government's tax credit scheme. At an earlier meeting, the management of the Federal Inland Revenue Service had kicked against the 2.7 trillion naira requested by the Ministry of Works through the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited for the funding of road projects under the tax credit scheme. The Minister of Works, Mr. Dave Umahi, gives further insight into the request.
The definition of tax credit is from the loading of our tax. And I give you an example, because sometimes, not this honorable Senate, but outside, they darken council without knowledge. Look at what we have done and achieved in Apapa Ocean. Vehicles used to stay on that road for 7 days, clear 7 days, and there will be no movement. But through this tax credit, private tax credit or Dangote, we've been able to achieve that. And with the use of concrete technology, there is no crack on that road. And for 50 years, there will be no problems on that road.
The Senate committee backs the minister's position while supporting the contribution of the policy to the development of the nation's road infrastructure.
It's a national project, and it was the exigency of that period that called for that presidential order. You all recall when the bridge collapsed between Jeba and Mopa, and there was no movement of any cargo between the south and the north, or between the north and the south. Food items are not going to the south, items from the south are not coming to the north. That was what necessitated that presidential order, if you all recall.
Nevertheless, the committee adds that fresh implementation of the policy outside the existing 2.7 trillion naira should be halted for now. From the National Assembly, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
The federal government has reiterated its commitment to address the incessant epileptic power supply in the southeast region to improve the economy and livelihood of the people. Vice President Kashim Shettima gave the government's position today at the launch of the Light Up Nigeria program for the Southeast and Business Roundtable held at the Old Governor's Lodge in Enugu, the Enugu state capital. The project, which has been executed by the Niger Delta Power Holding Company, is expected to be completed in 4 months.
Let's be seated, please.
8 the turn of the Southeast for the Light Up Nigeria project aimed at improving power supply across the country. The governors of the Southeast, members of the business community and other stakeholders are here at the Old Government Lodge in Enugu to witness the landmark event.
I understand in all the 36 states of the Federation, Anambra State is one that is doing free education from primary.
The host governor welcomes the guests, highlighting the importance of the initiative to the Southeast economy and livelihood of the people.
This project is of critical importance since it deals with the power sector, which I believe is pivotal to economic growth. Indeed, if we fixed power, a lot of other sectors would have fallen into place.
His counterparts in the region, one after the other, address the audience, challenging all stakeholders to do their part in the Light Up Nigeria project in the Southeast.
I want to say that enough of the book of lamentations. I listened to the first few speeches and quite a lot of lamentations. Let's move from lamentations to solutions now. And I want to believe that this particular session, at the end of it, will come out with actionable, executable agenda to provide power to our people.
I want to urge you, Mr. Vice President, and the stakeholders in this power industry to believe in implementing whatever thing we say today, rather than coming here to speak English, and at the end of the day, we achieve nothing.
There is a need for a comprehensive audit of decisions taken in the past, where we have gotten it right and where we didn't get it right, so that we will start from the known to the unknown.
And for the Minister of Power, The issue of right-of-way for power infrastructure is key, especially regarding payment of compensation.
The Light Up Southeast will attract financing for required infrastructure upgrades, and we use metering and related technology to achieve payment assurance. We're going to do things differently here. We will prove to the investors that if you put your money in this project, you are going to get your money back. That investment recovery assurance is required. And the banks too will be willing, because we're going to use technology, especially smart meters, to ensure that we collect electricity bills from.
The Light Up Nigeria initiative started to be dear to the President Bola Tinubu's administration, and the Vice President gave assurances of that commitment.
The Light Up Nigeria project powers the hope of our industrialists and serves as a long-awaited solution to the power supply deficit that has undermined our economy over the past decades. So this intervention isn't a ribbon-cutting charade. This is a calculated endeavor to re-engineer our economy, and whatever we design to oil the wheels of our industries is futile unless we stabilize the Nigerian electricity supply industry.
And then it's time for the business roundtable with the business community, the governors, and the vice president.
The first had to do with
One after the other, members of the business community make their requests and recommendations regarding the initiative to address the issue of epileptic power supply in the southeast region.
Still ahead on the news at 10, Central Bank's two-day Monetary Policy Committee meeting to decide interest rates kicks off in Abuja amid soaring prices. That's on Business News. Please join us again. Welcome back. Let's now head to the nation's capital, where Gloria Omezuke is standing by to give us the very latest from our Abuja studios. Hello, Gloria.
Many thanks, Ayo. Here in Abuja, the leadership of the Trade Union Congress says it will not be part of the planned nationwide protest by the Nigeria Labour Congress on Tuesday, February the 27th, because the union was never part of the meeting where the resolution to embark on strike was taken. President of the union, Mr. Festus Osifo, told journalists at a news conference in Abuja that instead of a protest, the Congress will be engaging the federal government on the implementation of the 15 solutions its members have outlined to address the current high cost of living.
This news conference by the leadership of the Trade Union Congress is holding barely 24 hours to the planned nationwide protest by the Nigeria Labour Congress slated for Tuesday, February the 27th and Wednesday, February the 28th.
We are proposing
the TUC claims they were never part of the decision to protest.
I know a lot of you've read the letter that was leaked. The letter was actually meant for TUC members, but it found its way to the press. Unfortunately, really regrettably. But I think you've read that letter. And I think it was very clearly stated in the letter. I think the reasons are clearly stated. So, we were not part of the process ab initio. We were not part of the agreement ab initio. So there is nothing to opt out from at all. Like as I have said repeatedly, that in trade union movement, you have a toolbox. That in that toolbox, you have different tools that you could use in calling government to order.
Instead of a protest, the TUC leadership is making some recommendations to the government about the impact of the rising cost of living on citizens.
The monetary policy managers should determine the true value of Naira. This can be easily implemented by CBN, who are the managers of our monetary policy, by directing banks to reject dollar bid above the threshold of 580 Naira to 650 Naira.
Other recommendations by the TUC include stopping the implementation of the CBN to immediately develop policies that will effectively monitor foreign exchange, curb crude oil theft, allow temporary importation of food, and reduce tax on the importation of materials used for manufacturing. The leadership says it will be engaging the government on the implementation of these recommendations in the weeks ahead and take further actions when necessary.
Meanwhile, it appears some Nigerians are not prepared to wait till tomorrow, the day set aside by the Nigeria Labour Congress, to begin their street agitation for improved economic conditions. In Edo State, a coalition of civil society organizations are out on a peaceful protest in Benin City, calling on the government to address the high cost of living in the country.
They said 15 naira yesterday. Now 5 they sell them now. Now they pay Nigeria when we want that. Cement when we did a play that time. Now cement bag of cement now 15,000.
Similarly, civil society organizations also staged a peaceful protest in Osogbo, the Osun state capital, to express their grievances on the current economic hardship. The protesters converged on Freedom Park and marched on to other parts of the city. In Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, the protesters also gathered under the Ojuelegba Bridge to vent their displeasure on the high cost of living in the country. Well, the presidency has appealed to the Nigeria Labour Congress to shelve its planned nationwide protest. The Minister of Information, Mr. Mohammed Idris, who was speaking after the Federal Executive Council, said the meeting the federal government had fulfilled almost all the demands put forward by the Labour Union.
All the 15 points that were agreed upon with Labour in the last quarter of last year, in October last year, they have almost all been fulfilled, over 80% compliance by the federal government. And so that is why government sometimes is baffled about the need for the Nigerian Labour Congress to think that it is appropriate for it to embark on a strike at this point. Federal government keeps calling on them, and we are not going to relent in drawing their attention to the need for them to see reason with government. While government is going through, and Nigeria is going through challenges of the moment, we don't think that it is the right time for Labour to embark on any kind of protest or whatsoever. Every point that they had laid down in the conversations or discussions we have had with them have been made. Except those ones that you cannot just buy off the shelf. For example, the issue of the CNG. So we are calling on the Nigerian Labour Congress to see reason. And we are also thanking other affiliates, organized labor, the TUC, and about 65 other organizations who are seeing things the way that the federal government is seeing by asking them, by saying they are not going to join the Nigerian Labour Congress.
Governor Babagana Zulum of Borno State is asking all internally displaced persons to be patient and remain in their camps while he works on restoring them to their ancestral homes. The governor stated this while addressing IDPs in Mafa camp, Mafa local government area of Borno State. Professor Zulum says his administration spent billions providing palliatives to IDPs in the past 5 years, and the gesture cannot be sustained owing to paucity of funds and economic realities.
Hundreds of women and children, majorly repentant insurgents relocated to Fulatari camp in Dikwa local government area last week, attempted to return to the bush before troops of the Nigerian army stopped them. The women accuse government and donor agencies of neglect since their return from the Hajj transition camp where they were kept after surrendering. While the governor had a meeting with the displaced persons, he did not mince words on his thoughts about their actions.
People should go back to their agricultural lands and cultivate their lands. The army has provided security, and there's nothing we can do. No any administration, be it federal or state, has the capacity to provide food and non-food items to millions of people on a daily basis. And therefore, anybody who is willing to stay in the camp, fine and good. Anybody who is not willing to stay in the camp, you want to go to the bush, allow him to go to the bush. We remain eternally grateful to the federal government. The Borno state government and the federal government are partnering together to see how we shall end the hunger crisis in the state.
The state government is resettling 447 households from Medina 2 and Muna camps to the newly constructed houses in Dalori community. The governor explains that the idea is to promote agricultural activities for self-reliance.
Government has been providing food and non-food items to these IDP camps for the last 11 years. It's no more sustainable. What we need is these IDPs to go back to their ancestral homes and start earning the means of livelihoods by themselves. So far so good. As I earlier told you, all official formal camps within Metropolitan Council and its environs were closed completely about 1 or 2 years ago.
The governor also wants former IDPs relocated from camps to have access to safe and secured lands for them to continue to engage in agriculture.
That's it from the nation's capital. It's back to you, Ayo, for the rest of the news at 10.
Thank you so much, Gloria. The Oyo State Governor, Seyi Makinde, has ordered the closure of a facility being used by suspected illegal miners to process and package lithium out of the state. The governor ordered the closure of the facility, which was originally a factory meant for recycling batteries and tires. He equally ordered the arrest of 4 persons suspected to be operating at the site, noting that they operated against the approved license secured from the government for business operations in the state. Governor Makinde, who was on an unscheduled inspection tour to the factory site in Oluyole local government in Ibadan, said that the preliminary investigation revealed that the factory was being operated by some Chinese nationals. He adds that although the federal government issued an operational license to the miners in line with constitutional provision, there will always be security threats and concerns when states do not have an input in the issuance of mining licenses. It's now time for some business news with Will Ibom. Will.
Thank you, Ayotunde, and welcome to Business News. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, has kicked off its 2-day meeting today, February the 26th, amid skyrocketing inflation and weakening naira. This marks the first time the MPC will meet since the CBN governor, Mr. Olayemi Cardoso, assumed office in October last year. The MPC is expected to focus on several key considerations. These include evaluating the disinflation trends observed in advanced economies and monitoring the measures implemented by global monetary authorities. Meanwhile, analysts believe that the newly constituted MPC will most likely increase interest rates at the end of its meeting tomorrow, Tuesday, February the 27th. At its last meeting held in July 2023, the committee had pegged the benchmark interest rate at 18.75%. Now, International Breweries PLC, makers of Euro Lager beer, has urged the graduates of the Euro Indigenous Entrepreneurship University Training Program to soar higher with the skills acquired from what they described as a first-of-its-kind initiative. Speaking during the award ceremony held at the University of Nigeria Business School Enugu campus, the coordinator, Consultancies, Research and Trainings, UNN Business School, Professor Chuka Ifedioro, advised the graduates to ensure that they impact the society in a positive manner. It's the graduation and award ceremony for trainees of Eurolager Indigenous Entrepreneurship University Training Program here at the University of Nigeria Business School, Enugu campus, and graduates make their way into the hall for the commencement of the event. After months of training on indigenous entrepreneurship, risk management, customer relationship management, business ethics and governance, basic records and accounting, business law and regulatory environment, digital transformation in business and supplier relationship management, it's time for this round of program to come to an end.
To not only acknowledge exceptional abilities or accomplishments, rather, they represent the culmination of hours spent learning, exploring, creating, innovating, pushing boundaries, rising to challenges, and ultimately succeeding.
In his address to the graduates, the marketing manager of the Hero Lager beer, Dube Moji, challenged them to put into practice what they've learned as the brand is taking this initiative beyond the Southeast to the South-South and Southwest.
I tell you with all certainty that the knowledge you have acquired here will give you far more speed, progress, advancement, mileage in your business. So much so that you will overtake people who don't have this knowledge that you acquire now.
Connected.
Because knowledge is power, and now you have that power.
It's time for the presentation of certificates to the graduates, and one after the other, they step out to receive the documents as a pledge to do more.
They helped us to bring us out into school. Well, some of us didn't go to school. And this business education is not easily acquired. Not easily acquired, but they made it easy for us. So we are grateful to them also.
As they conclude this maiden edition of the Indigenous Entrepreneurship Program, the Hero brand is optimistic that the initiative will foster a growth mindset that promotes continuous improvement and excellence throughout the lives of these young men and women. Now we head to the domestic equities market report, which kicked off the first trading day of the week in the red as investors await central bank monetary policy decision. Laddie Williams tells us more.
Hello and welcome to the stock market report. Last trading week of February, and the month is looking quite negative. Maybe it's because of the month of Valentine. We're seeing profit taking even dominating the market today. 101,000, at this time. A stockbroker I spoke to today, Mr. Abdul-Rashid Mohammed, said if 100,000 holds, maybe bullish momentum could return to the market. Market cap 55.81 trillion. Let's look at the Guinness counter today. We see, even though it's a negative close, we're seeing some stocks doing really well. One is Julie Pharmacy there, 2.57 naira to close, up 9.83%. It's been having a good run. That's Julie Pharmacy. 52 weeks ago was trading about 54 kobo, up about 59% just last week and closing at 2.57 naira today. Let's look at the losers counter now. We see Nestle topping that counter down a big 10% today. Well, trading day before the first MPC meeting of 2024, that's today. We'll be covering the meeting outcome live tomorrow from about 1 p.m. We'll see if it's going to be another hike or a hold. We'll definitely find out. But today, the bears have it.
And that's a wrap on business news. It's back to Ayotunde for the rest of the news at 10.
Many thanks, Will. A news just in, a meeting between the federal government and the organized labor has ended without any agreement between both parties. Now, the meeting, which was hosted by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. George Akume, was not open to the media. Alexei Navalny's ally, Maria Pevchik, says the Russian opposition leader was about to be freed and the prisoner swap when he died. Now, she revealed this in a video posted on Navalny's YouTube channel. We'll hear Simon Puzi with other international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Alexei Navalny was about to be freed in a prisoner swap when he died. That's according to his ally, Maria Pevchik.
16 февраля 2024 года.
In a video posted on Mr. Navalny's YouTube channel, Ms. Pevchik, who is the chairman of his anti-corruption foundation, said negotiations for a prisoner swap had been underway for 2 years. She said the Russian opposition leader was going to be exchanged for Vadim Krasikov, a Russian hitman who is serving a life sentence for murder in Germany. 2 US citizens currently held in Russia were also going to be part of the deal. She added that negotiations were at their final stage on the 15th of February. The next day, Mr. Navalny died in his cell in the prison colony in Siberia, where he was being held on a 19-year sentence over charges that were widely seen as politically motivated. A member of the US Air Force is in a critical condition after setting himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington. The man videoed himself before pouring some form of lighter fuel on himself and setting himself alight. Officers from the US Secret Service extinguished the flames before the man was taken to hospital with serious injuries. The US Air Force confirmed an active duty serviceman was involved, but he has not been identified. The police, the Secret Service and other authorities are investigating. Before setting himself on fire, he said he would no longer be complicit in genocide, and he was heard shouting "Free Palestine" as he burned. Mauritius has denied a Norwegian cruise ship permission to dock at the capital Port Louis over fears of a potential cholera outbreak on board. At least 15 people on the Norwegian Dawn have been isolated over suspected illness. Mauritian authorities said the decision to block the ship was taken in order to avoid any health risks. Samples were taken for testing on Sunday, with results expected to be known on Tuesday. The passengers developed mild symptoms of a stomach illness during a trip to South Africa. That's according to a representative of the Norwegian cruise line. Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has claimed he has been a victim of political persecution since leaving office just over a year ago. He told tens of thousands of supporters in Sao Paulo that coup allegations against him were a lie. He also called for an amnesty for hundreds of his supporters convicted for attacks on public buildings. Police are investigating whether Mr. Bolsonaro incited a failed coup after losing the 2022 election. The suspended Conservative MP Lee Anderson has issued a statement renewing his criticism of London Mayor Sadiq Khan. Mr. Anderson accuses Mr. Khan of double standards for political benefit over how he handled policing of pro-Palestinian protests outside Parliament. The former Tory deputy chairman also said that while his words were clumsy, they were born out of sheer frustration. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said Lee's comments weren't acceptable, they were wrong. That's why he's had the whip suspended. Words matter, especially in the current environment where tensions are running high, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to choose them carefully. Facebook and Instagram owner Meta says it will form a team to tackle deceptive artificial intelligence content in the upcoming EU elections in June. It is concerned by how generative AI tech, which can fake videos, images and audio, might be used to trick voters. The announcement comes 2 weeks after Meta signed an agreement with other big tech firms committing to fighting such content. And the Indian Railways has ordered an investigation after a freight train travelled more than 70 kilometres without drivers. Video shared on social media showed the train zooming past several stations at high speed. The railways say the train was brought to a halt and no one was hurt. The 53-wagon train carrying stone chips was on its way to Punjab from Jammu when it stopped in Kathua for a change in crew. Officials say it began moving down a slope on the railway tracks after the train driver and his assistant got off. The train moved at a speed of nearly 100 kilometres an hour and managed to cross about 5 stations before it was eventually stopped. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel's studios in Lagos.
Many thanks indeed, Simon. In the world of sports, 9-time African champions Super Falcons of Nigeria are through to the fourth and final round of qualifier for 2024 Paris Olympic Games. The Falcons this evening defeated the Lionesses of Cameroon 1-0 at the MKO Abiola Stadium in Abuja to advance 1-0 on aggregate. Esther Okoronkwo scored the only goal of the match in the 14th minutes of the first half, and Nigeria will now face between South Africa or Tanzania for one of the two tickets in April. Club football now, Everton have had their 10-point deduction for breaching the EPL profitability and sustainability rules reduced to 6 following their appeal hearing. Everton were sanctioned by an independent commission on November 17th last year for a breach of the rules and appealed the decision, with the hearing taking place over 3 days, which concluded at the start of February. We stay with club footballers. Coach Eddie Howe is confident that Newcastle's season can still end on a very special note, despite a disappointing campaign so far as it targets FA Cup glory. The Magpies will take on the second-tier Blackburn in the 5th round of the FA Cup competition on Tuesday night, and Coach Howe says his players could still write their own history. And that's a wrap on sports. It's back to Ayo.
Many thanks, Kelly. And the main news again. The Federal Executive Council today ordered the implementation of the Stephen Oronsanye report as it approved the merger, scrapping and relocation of some parastatals and agencies of government. We also told you that the meeting between the federal government and the organized labor has ended without any agreement.